This CACFP meal pattern webinar on offer versus serve in CACFP was presented on January 10th, 2019 and presented to a center sponsor audience. This version you are currently viewing has been edited and shortened from the original.
Hello and welcome to the Meal Pattern Success webinar on offer versus serve in the CACFP. This session will only be relevant for after-school at-risk sponsors and adult daycare sponsors only, since they are the only sponsor type who are eligible to use offer versus serve in the CACFP. Therefore, if you are a sponsor who does not serve the at-risk and adult populations, this information may not pertain to you. I would recommend that you take a look at some of our other webinars that we have to offer. My name is Megan Tashida, and I am joined by Nicole Gregeroff and Kathy Brock today, and I will be presenting the webinar. Before we get started, since this is a webinar, we will be muting all microphones, but we'll be accepting questions through the chat box. At the end of the session, we'll have around 5 minutes to answer any questions you might have. Questions you submit will be answered at that time. We'll be going over the definition and requirements of offer versus serve, also known as OVS. We'll also look at some common questions about OVS, and at the end, answer any additional questions you might have. So what is the offer versus serve? Offer versus serve is an optional style of meal service for after-school at-risk sponsors and adult daycare sponsors that allows participants to decline some of the food offered and a reimbursable breakfast, lunch, or supper. It is not allowed at snacks since there's not enough components to offer enough choice while still allowing for enough nutrition. The benefits of OVS is that it helps save money by reducing food waste since participants get a choice of what they want to eat, and increased amounts of choice also increases satisfaction for participants. We need to know a few different terms before we get into how to use OVS. The first term to know is food component. A food component is a food category that makes up a reimbursable meal for CACFP. There are 5 different food components in CACFP. They are fluid milk, fruits, grains, meat or meat alternates, and vegetables. The next term to know is food item. A food item is different from a food component because while the food component is a category of foods, a food item is a specific food within a food component. So a carrot is a food item that is within the vegetable food component. Peanuts are a food item within the meat alternate category. The definition of a food item in CACFP and other child nutrition programs is a little different to how you might understand food items. You might think of a whole apple as a different food item compared to applesauce, but since they are both apples, they are considered the same food item. Finally, let's define combination foods. A combination food is a food item that contains 2 or more food components. A peanut butter and jelly sandwich would be a combination food since it has peanut butter, which is a food item within the meat alternate component, and it has bread, which would be a food item within the grains food component. Now that we know what a food component, a food item, and a combination food are, let's look at the requirements for offer versus serve at breakfast. If you wanted to use the OVS meal service style for breakfast, you would need to offer 4 different food items and the minimum serving size for the fluid milk component, the grains component, a combined fruit and vegetable component, and 1 additional food component from either the meat alternate component, the fruit or vegetable component, or the grains component. While the fruit and vegetable components are a separate component for lunch, supper, and snacks, at breakfast they are still 1 component. This means if you serve milk, pancakes, oranges, and apples for breakfast, you would have 4 different food items from the 3 different food components. From the 4 different items that are served, your participants must take 3 different food items. So if you had your milk, pancakes, oranges, and scrambled eggs out on the meal service area, and participants take milk, orange, and apples, that would count as 3 different food items. It's only from 2 different food components, but for breakfast, as long as the food item served covers the requirement of 4 food items from the meal components shown on the screen, then the meal will be reimbursable. Sometimes you may have participants who take 2 servings of 1 item. If, for example, you had a participant who took 2 milk and 2 servings of pancake, that would only count as 2 items, not 3. Here's a sample menu of waffles, strawberries, oranges, and fluid milk. This meets the offer requirements of OVS. If you had a participant who took waffles, strawberries, and fluid milk, this would be a reimbursable meal. If a participant wanted strawberries, oranges, and fluid milk, That is still 3 different items and would also be a reimbursable meal. Sometimes a few of the food items may be offered using combination foods. A breakfast burrito that contains scrambled eggs and sausages wrapped around a tortilla would be considered a combination food and would be considered 2 food items. This meal would meet the offer requirements because it has a grain component and a meat alternate component, a vegetable or fruit component, and the fluid milk component. Our participants take all the offered food items, and this would be a creditable meal since participants can take more than the minimum of 3 items. What if a participant comes through and only takes the hash brown and fluid milk? Would this be a creditable meal? No. This is because the hash brown and fluid milk makes up only 2 food items. If the participant had taken the breakfast burrito and either the hash brown or fluid milk, they would have 3 food items, but not taking the breakfast burrito meant that they only had 2 food items. When combination foods are offered at breakfast and only 2 additional food items are offered along with it, this will require the participants to take the combination food and another food item in order to claim a reimbursable meal. If you're serving a combination food item at breakfast, and you know that you have a large percentage of the participants who may not want to take the item for whatever reason, a good way to make sure that there's enough items for all participants to get a reimbursable meal would be to add an additional food item on the menu. While this will increase the number of food items you're serving and increase costs a little, depending on the additional food items offered, it can earn you more reimbursement since more of the meals taken will be reimbursable, while increasing participant satisfaction. In addition, the cost increase might actually be minimal, or there might not be cost increase at all, since you might sell less of the cost of your combination food items. Let's do a quick poll. Let's say you wanted to serve fluid milk, kiwis, eggs, and 2 different types of cereal for breakfast. Would this meet the offer requirement for offer versus serve breakfast? The answer is yes. This would meet the offer requirements for offer versus serve breakfast because it has 4 items with 2 cereals counting as 1 item. Here's another poll. What if you had a participant who chooses fluid milk and 2 cereals for his breakfast? Would his breakfast be reimbursable? The answer would be no. Because a participant must choose at least 3 items and 2 cereals, and the 2 cereals are considered 1 item. In these situations, site staff should encourage, but never force, the participant to go back and choose 1 more item. An easy solution would be to have a basket full of kiwis at the end of the line so participants can quickly grab it and have a fully reimbursable meal. Now that we understand OVS for breakfast, let's move on to the OVS requirements for lunch or supper. The requirements are the same for lunch and supper. The lunch or supper must have at least 1 item from each of the 5 food components in the minimum serving sizes. This means you need at least 1 item from the fluid milk component, the grains component, the fruit component, the vegetable component, and the meat or meat alternate component. Note that the fruit components and the vegetable components are separate components for the lunch and supper meals. A lunch of barbecue pork with coleslaw, oranges, and fluid milk would have all 5 components. Out of these 5 components, a participant must take at least 3 of the components. So a participant who takes the barbecue sandwich and the coleslaw would have taken 3 components, since they are taking a meat component, a grain component, and a vegetable component. This would be a reimbursable meal. Let's look at a sample menu. In this supper, you have roast chicken, whole wheat bun, steamed carrots, pineapple tidbits, and fluid milk. This would meet the offer requirements and then some of serving at least 1 item from all 5 components. And there's also peaches in that. If you had a participant who takes roast chicken, the bun, and the carrots, then this would be a reimbursable meal. What if you had a participant who wanted steamed carrots, pineapple tidbits, and peaches instead? This would not be a reimbursable meal because even though the participant took 3 items, it does not cover 3 different food components. The pineapple and peaches are both in the fruit component, and the carrots is in the vegetable component. This is only 2 components, and for lunch and supper, the participant needs to take at least 3 food components, not just 3 food items. In this situation, just like in the situation before with breakfast, encourage the participant to take 1 or more items so they would have at least 3 food components. Here's another supper menu that includes a combination food. Again, all 5 meal components are available, so it meets the offer requirements for OVS supper. If a participant took the meat lasagna and the fluid milk, this would be a reimbursable meal since it includes 3 components. The meat lasagna will cover the meat component and the grains component, and the fluid milk will cover the fluid milk component. If you had a second participant who takes roasted green beans, apple slices, and fluid milk, that would also be a reimbursable meal. Since this includes 3 components, even though the participant didn't take the combination food item. The roasted green beans will be the vegetable component, the apple slices will be the fruit component, and the fluid milk will be the fluid milk component. As you can see, OVS rules are different for breakfast and lunch and supper, so make sure that all staff are aware of the differences between the meals if you serve both breakfast, lunch, or supper. Let's try another poll. Would a lunch with fluid milk, cheese pizza, pineapples, and/or a green salad meet the offer requirements for OVS lunch? The answer is yes, because you are offering all 5 components. The pizza includes both the grains and the meat alternate component. Let's try one more example. You have a participant who chooses fluid milk and pizza for their OVS lunch. Would this be a reimbursable meal? It can get complicated when you have combination foods or you offer 2 or more items from the same component. For example, if you wanted to provide strawberries and oranges, your participants will need to know that taking the strawberries and oranges will only count as 1 component for lunch or supper. To help cut down on the confusion, when you have combination foods or 2 or more food items from the same component, you must provide some instruction or signs to help participants select a reimbursable meal. Here's a sample sign for serving combination foods at lunch or supper. The sign only needs to be put out when you have combination foods and helps your participants know how many items they need to have. It is a simple and visual way to help your participants out and make your mealtime staff's life a little easier as well. When it comes to OVS, there's a lot of different ways that you can serve OVS, and so there's a lot of different questions that come up regarding what's allowed and not allowed for offer versus serve. We'll go through a few of the common questions we get. The first question is one we get from a lot of school districts since the requirements are different for CACFP and NSLP. The question is, do participants need to take a fruit or vegetable for a reimbursable OVS meal? And the answer is no. Since CACFP OVS does not require participants to take any specific components for the meal to be reimbursable. The only requirement is for participants to take a minimum of 3 food items for breakfast and a minimum of 3 food components for lunch or supper. So a participant at lunchtime can take just the grains, meat, and fluid milk and have a fully reimbursable meal. This is another question about fruits and vegetables in OVS. The question is, can I substitute a vegetable component for the fruit component at lunch or supper in OVS? This question comes up because there is a flexibility in the regular lunch and supper meal pattern in CACFP to substitute a second vegetable component for the fruit component at those meals. For offer versus serve, however, the answer is no, because in offer versus serve, you need to offer all 5 components: fluid milk, grains, meat or meat alternates, vegetables, and fruit. This allows participants to get more choices and higher nutrition intake. Since you are always allowed to serve more items in OVS, there's nothing that would prevent you from offering an additional vegetable with the meal if you know that your participants prefer having extra vegetables. The next question, does the 3 items a week limit for substituting grains with meat or meat alternates at breakfast apply to OVS? If you're not familiar with this new flexibility, sponsors are now allowed to substitute the grains component with a meat or meat alternate at breakfast up to 3 times a week. So a breakfast with oatmeal, banana, and milk would also be creditable if you had a sausage patty, banana, and milk. This is allowed up to 3 times a week only. However, if you are serving an offer versus serve breakfast, this flexibility does not apply since you can already serve meat or meat alternates as the 4th item at breakfast without any restrictions. This means that sausage patty, banana, and milk offered at breakfast would not be creditable as an offer versus serve breakfast. But offering oatmeal, sausage patty, banana, and milk at breakfast would be creditable offer versus serve breakfast, and participants may choose any 3 of those 4 items. Here's the next question. If you are serving supper and providing multiple grain options, do all the grain options have to be whole grain rich? For example, you are serving toast, rice, green beans, a hamburger patty, and peaches. The toast is whole grain rich, but the rice is just enriched white rice. Would this meet the whole grain rich requirement of serving one whole grain rich grain component each day? The answer is no. If this is the only meal with a whole grain rich item served that day, then all the grain options served will have to be whole grain rich. If you have a participant take the enriched rice with the hamburger and peaches, they would not be getting a whole grain rich grain. The intention of requiring whole grain rich items once per day is so that participants will be exposed to more nutritious grain options. For sponsors offering multiple grain options during an OVS meal, make sure that all grain options are whole grain rich if the meal is being used to meet daily whole grain rich requirements. Here is our last question, and this one is about cost. A lot of my participants want to take all the available components for their OVS meal, and it's making my cost go sky high. Can I limit the number of items or components taken per participant? The answer is no. While we understand that cost considerations are a big part of any food service operation, the concept of OVS is that you, as a sponsor, get to decide what to offer, but the participant gets to choose what they take, and the only limitation for them is that they need to take at least a minimum amount of food items for breakfast and a minimum amount of food components for lunch or supper to make sure that they get enough nutrients. There is no limitation on the maximum amount of foods they can take. If this is an issue that is causing high cost overruns, you can consider offering the minimum amount of food items for breakfast or a minimum amount of food components for lunch and supper. While it might be nice to offer participants 6 different items for sponsors, sponsors are only required to offer 5 components, and if you meet all 5 components in the minimum serving size with 5 or less items, if you have a combination food item, then that will be enough to meet the offer requirements of OVS. Another way to balance your budget would be to mix high-cost items with low-cost items for meals. While participants may take all the components, the overall cost of the meal may be lightened. Finally, another way to fight cost issues is to switch away from the OVS to a standard meal service. If your participants are taking all options offered already, then it might make more sense to have a standard meal service where you have 3 components offered for breakfast and 5 components for lunch or supper. In the standard meal service, there's more predictability in inventory and cost and potentially 1 less item to serve for breakfast. If you still have questions or want to review some of the information you learned today, we have 2 handouts on OVS. The first, on the left, provides basic definitions and requirements of OVS for breakfast and lunch. The second, on the right, provides illustrated examples of reimbursable and non-reimbursable meals for breakfast and lunch and supper. This can be downloaded from the CACFP meal pattern and menu planning page. Today we looked at what OVS is and the requirements for OVS. We also discussed some common questions that we've seen related to OVS. Thank you for all you do to feed Oregon. Have a great day.